The man shoved the girl forward with one hand, his bottle still in the other. She stumbled onto the rough plank stage, her hair hanging in her face, her eyes hidden. The crowd shifted, boots scraping against dirt. A few men laughed. Some turned away. Others leaned closer. The auctioneer cleared his throat, uncertain, but the father barked louder. "Start it." His voice slurred. "She ain't worth much, but she's worth something. Put her up." The auctioneer looked at him hard. "This ain't stock, Ray." "It is tonight." The father's bottle swung. "Say the words." The girl kept her head down. The murmurs rolled through the crowd like dust, rising and falling, unsure whether to cheer or spit. One woman pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders. A man muttered, "He's gone too far." Another said, "He's drunk. Let him burn it out." But no one moved. The auctioneer raised his hand half-heartedly. "Bidding starts at—" A voice cut through. Sharp, cold, certain. "No." Heads turned. A widow stepped forward, black dress plain, her face drawn but unshaken. She did not raise her hand. She did not speak to the auctioneer. She spoke to the father. "You'll not sell her here." The father squinted, wobbling. "And who'll stop me? You." The widow stood straighter. "Me, if no one else." The laughter broke again, louder this time, men elbowing one another. The auctioneer rubbed his chin. "Ma'am, this ain't your fight." "It is if she stands there." The widow's eyes flicked to the girl. "And she does." The father shoved his daughter's shoulder. "Head up, girl. Show your face." The girl lifted her chin slowly. Her cheeks were streaked with dirt. Her lip trembled, but her eyes, when they met the widow's, did not flinch. The widow did not look away either. "She's mine to sell," the father spat. "Ain't no law says different." "There's law," the widow said, "and there's shame." The auctioneer tried again. Softer now. "Folks, let's keep steady. Ain't no reason to turn this into—" "Shut it," the father barked. He pointed at the widow. "You want her? Then bid. Ain't that how this works?" The widow did not blink. "I don't bid." "Then stand aside." "I don't stand aside." The tension snapped through the crowd. Some laughed again, uneasy. Others muttered, "Leave it be." One man shouted, "Let him sell his burden." But no one stepped forward. No one stopped him. The father leaned close to the auctioneer. "Say it. Start the call." The widow spoke again, louder. "If it's a deal you want, then here it is." The crowd quieted. Even the auctioneer froze. The widow stepped closer to the stage. "She comes with me, not as a sale, as blood." The father blinked. "Blood? She'll be my daughter." A ripple went through the people. Whispers, sharp and quick. The father laughed, but the sound was jagged. "That's no offer. That's thievery." "It's mercy," the widow said. The auctioneer raised his hands. "Let's slow down," the father snapped. "She's mine, always been mine, always will." The widow's voice stayed steady. "Not tonight." The girl shifted, her shoulders tightening as if waiting for a blow. The father slammed the bottle against the stage rail, glass cracked, liquor spilling onto wood. "You think you're better?" he shouted. "You think you can take what's mine because you're lonely in that house?" The widow's eyes did not move from his. "I think you're done." The silence held heavy. The auctioneer dropped his gaze. A man at the back muttered, "She's got more steel than all of us." Another answered, "She'll get herself killed." The father raised the broken bottle. The girl flinched, but the widow stepped closer still, close enough the crowd could see the set of her jaw. "Drop it," she said. He sneered. "Make me." The widow's voice cut like iron. "If you raise that hand, You'll never lower it again." The crowd stirred. A few men shifted forward, uncertain, as if they might back her. Others shook their heads, unwilling. The father's grip faltered, his eyes blurred, his chest heaved. Then with a curse he flung the bottle into the dirt. The glass shattered, the liquor soaking the ground. The widow reached her hand up to the girl. "Come down." The girl did not move. The widow's voice softened, only slightly. "You've had enough of him. Step down." The girl's eyes darted to her father. He stared back, red-eyed, shaking. "Don't you dare." The girl's hand trembled, but she moved. One step, then another. She slipped off the stage, into the widow's reach. The widow steadied her, hand firm on her shoulder. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The father roared. "She's mine!" The widow's reply was cold, final. "She's mine now." The auctioneer said nothing. No one said anything. The crowd broke into whispers, some fearful, some mocking, some too ashamed to speak. The father swayed, fury twisting his face. "You'll pay for this." The widow's eyes stayed locked on his. "Then send me the bill." The girl pressed closer to her side. The widow guided her through the crowd, the people parting in silence. Boots scraped, hats dipped. No laughter now, only eyes that followed, heavy with things unsaid. Behind them, the father sank onto the stage, his head in his hands, rage and shame twisting together. The widow did not look back. The girl whispered once, barely heard. "Why?" The widow's answer was blunt. "Because someone had to." The girl nodded, silent again. The dirt road stretched ahead, the sound of the crowd fading behind them. Each step away was heavy but certain. The girl's shoulders loosened, only a fraction. The widow's hand stayed steady on her back. They did not speak again. They did not need to. The night held its breath as they walked, and the auction that should never have happened ended without a sale, but with a bond forged in defiance. The hall did not empty after the girl was led down. Men stayed rooted, muttering under their breath, anger mixing with amusement. The father leaned on the stodge rail, head bowed, but when he lifted it again, his eyes were bloodshot and cruel. "She ain't yours," he spat at the widow. "She'll never be yours." The widow did not flinch. Her hand stood firm on the girl's shoulder. The crowd pressed closer, circling them in whispers. One man barked, "If she wants the brat, let her pay. Ain't that fair?" Another laughed, sharp. "Pay with what?" "She's got nothing left but that empty house." The widow's voice cut through, low but steady. "I'll give you marriage." The murmurs froze. A pause, heavy and strange. The father blinked. "Marriage?" The widow raised her chin. "She'll be my daughter, and my blood. She'll have my name." Jeers rose, men elbowing each other. A woman near the back gasped, covering her mouth. Another whispered, "It's dignity she's giving, not coin." The auctioneer stepped down from the stage, shaking his head. "Ma'am, that ain't how things are done." "It is tonight," the widow said. The father shoved away from the rail, stumbling closer. "You think you can shame me? Stand up here, talk like that? She's mine to deal, mine to trade." The widow's answer was blunt. "Not anymore." The crowd split in two currents. Some men laughed louder, mocking. "Widow's lost her mind," one said. "What kind of deal's that?" Another spat into the dirt. "A woman can't set the terms." But from the shadows came softer voices. Women huddled close, whispering sharp, urgent. "She's right. Better the widow's hand than the block. At least the girl would have a roof, not ruin. She's making family where none stood." The girl said nothing. Her lips pressed tight. her eyes burning, locked on the widow's face as if testing whether she would falter. The father's voice grew louder. "She's mine till I'm dead." The widow didn't blink. "Then you'd best start digging." Gasps cut through the room. Someone hissed, "She'll get herself killed." Someone else muttered, "Maybe it's time." The auctioneer raised both hands, desperate now. "Enough of this. This ain't an auction anymore. Everyone go home." But no one moved. The father's hand twitched toward his belt. The widow's eyes dropped there, then back to his face. Her voice was even. "You try it. You won't leave this room." He sneered. "Big words, widow." "Empty words." The girl shifted, pressing into the widow's side. The widow's hand didn't waver. A man stepped forward from the crowd, smirking. "If marriage is the price, then what stops me from taking her the same way? I'll make her mine tonight." The widow turned to him, eyes like stone. "You'd break her for spite. I'd bind her for safety. There's a difference." The man laughed, but his laugh was thin. Another voice rose from the back, a woman's voice. "Leave it. You've taken enough already." The hall fractured. Jeers clashed with whispers, the sound sharp, ugly, unsteady. The father shouted over them, "She don't need your pity. She needs discipline. She's wild blood, same as her mother." The widow snapped back. "She needs a name that ain't spit out in shame. She needs a hand that don't strike." The crowd roared louder, like a storm breaking. Men cursed, women argued, children pulled closer to their mothers' skirts. The auctioneer's voice was lost in the noise. The widow raised her voice above it all. "I said it once. I'll say it again. She'll be mine. She'll carry my house. She'll be blood." The girl's eyes widened, burning brighter, as if the words lit something inside her. Still, she spoke nothing. The father staggered closer, face inches from the widow's. His breath reeked. His words cut low. "You'll regret this. She'll ruin you same way she ruined me." The widow's reply was steady. "She didn't ruin you. You ruined her." Silence slammed the hall. For a moment, no one breathed. The father backed away, spitting into the dirt. "Take her then. Take your cursed prize, but don't come running when she burns your house down around you." The widow didn't move. "She's not the fire. You are." The crowd shifted, uneasy. No one laughed now. The jeers softened into mutters. The whispers grew sharper. A woman near the front murmured, "She's brave." Another whispered, "She'll pay dearly." The auctioneer rubbed his face, exhausted. "This night's done. Go on home, all of you." Slowly the people began to break apart. Boots scuffed, doors opened, voices carried into the night air. Some glanced back, but none lingered long. The father stood on the stage alone, shoulders slumped, bottle gone, rage leaking into shame. The widow guided the girl out, steady hand at her back. The girl finally lifted her eyes, searching the widow's face. "Why?" she whispered. The widow answered without pause, "Because no one else would." They stepped into the night, the air sharp, the silence heavier than the noise they'd left behind. The girl's eyes burned brighter now, though she still said nothing more. The widow's hand stayed firm, and neither looked back. The cabin smelled of smoke and old pine. The widow set wood into the hearth, struck a match, and lit the kindling until it caught. The fire rose slow, crackling, throwing light against the walls. Shadows moved across the beams, stretching long. The girl stood near the doorway, still, her back pressed to the frame as if ready to flee. Her eyes followed every movement the widow made. "Sit," the widow said. The girl didn't move. The widow didn't look at her. She fed another log into the fire, brushing ash from her hands. "If you're staying here, you sit." The girl crossed the room, slow steps, then dropped onto the wooden chair closest to the fire. Her knees tucked in, her hands tight around them. The widow lowered herself into the other chair. The firelight burned between them, cutting the silence. The girl finally spoke, voice thin but sharp. "Are we married now?" The widow met her eyes. "Not yet." "Then when?" "Now." The girl blinked. "That's it?" "That's it," the widow said. The girl's voice rose. "You didn't ask. You didn't even say anything." "I said enough," the widow answered. "What we spoke in that hall was the vow. This is the rest." The fire popped, sending sparks against the iron grate. The girl's gaze didn't soften. "So I'm yours now?" "Yes." "Like a daughter?" "Yes." "Not like a wife?" "No." The girl leaned back, shoulders against the chair. "Good." The widow studied her, the sharpness in her eyes, the stiffness in her voice. She spoke again, blunt as before. "You'll take my name. That'll shield you. No man can say different now." The girl's lips pressed tight. "They'll say plenty. Let them. Words don't cut as deep as hands." The girl turned her face toward the fire. Her voice dropped lower. "He'll come here." "He already has," the widow said. The girl looked back, startled. The widow's eyes narrowed. "Not him yet. His kind, his men. They'll test the door. They'll mutter about debts. They'll circle the house before they sleep." The girl's breath quickened. "And if they come in?" The widow's hand rested on the chair arm, steady. "Then they'll leave different than they came." The fire cracked again. The girl stared at the flame until her eyes watered. "Why me?" she whispered. The widow's voice was flat. "Because you were there. Because you stood and no one else stepped down." The girl shook her head. "That's not reason." "It's enough reason," the widow said. The girl's voice sharpened again. "You don't even know me. I don't need to." The words hung heavy, as final as a door closing. The girl shifted, restless. "Then what do I call you?" "Call me what you like." "Mother." "If it suits you." "Widow." "If it suits you." The girl thought a moment, then said nothing. The widow leaned closer to the fire, shadows stretching across her face. "We'll keep this simple. You stay under my roof. You eat at my table. You carry my name. In return, you don't run, and you don't bow your head to him again." The girl's voice was barely above the crackle. "And if I want to leave?" "Then you leave," the widow said, "but you don't go back." The fire hissed as a log collapsed, sparks leaping. The girl whispered again, "He'll find us." The widow's jaw tightened. "He'll try." Outside, a low murmur rose in the dark. Men's voices carrying through the night air. Laughter edged with threat. Boots scuffed against dirt, circling. The girl's eyes widened. "They're here." The widow didn't rise. They were always coming. The voices sharpened outside, one louder than the rest. "Debts unpaid, widow. Doors don't stay shut forever." The girl gripped the chair arms, knuckles white. "What do we do?" The widow's reply was cold. "We wait." The men muttered, their words broken by distance. "You can't hide her. She ain't yours. He'll come for her himself," the girl whispered. "They'll break in." The widow finally stood, slow and steady. She walked to the door, slid the bar across, and pressed her palm flat against the wood. "They won't," she said. The girl's voice shook. "How can you be sure?" The widow turned, her eyes catching firelight. "Because they fear silence more than shouting, and I won't give them shouting." The men outside laughed again, hollered, cursed. One voice rose sharp. Widow thinks she's got a new bride. Another answered with jeers. The girl buried her face against her knees. The widow crossed the room, set her hand firm on the girl's shoulder. "Look at me," she said. The girl lifted her head. "You're mine now," the widow said. "That means you stand. You don't cower. They can scream till dawn. They don't get in." The girl's eyes burned. She held the widow's gaze, silent but steady. The voices outside faded into mutters again, drifting with the wind. A boot scraped the porch, then silence. The widow removed her hand from the girl's shoulder. She walked back to her chair, sat, and faced the fire. "They'll be back," the girl whispered. "Always," the widow said, "but so will we." The fire sank lower, flames curling down into coals. The girl sat straighter, her eyes still bright, though her body trembled. The widow spoke one last time. "Marriage isn't love here. It's shield. You wear it now. Remember that." The girl nodded once. "I will." The fire burned on. The cabin walls held. The night pressed close, but the vows had been spoken, and neither of them flinched. The knock came hard against the door, loud enough to rattle the latch. The widow rose from her chair, the fire still low in the hearth. She didn't hurry. She slid the bar back slow, then pulled the door open. The father stood there, swaying, mud up to his knees, bottle gone. His eyes were red, his face lined with fury and drink. "Give her back," his voice cracked. "She's mine." The girl stayed in her chair, frozen, her hands tight around her knees. The widow stepped into the doorway, blocking him. "No." The father shoved a hand against the frame. "Don't play with me. She's my blood. She goes where I say." The widow's voice was clipped. "She stays." "She's a debt," he snarled. "A weight I carried long enough. You can't take her and call it clean." The widow didn't move. "I can." "I did." The father's breath came hard, chest heaving. "You think this town will back you? You think they'll stand behind your word over mine?" The widow's tone cut sharp. "Let them choose." Boots crunched outside, more steps in the dirt. The sheriff came forward, badge catching the firelight from inside the cabin. He looked from the widow to the father, then to the girl behind them. "Evening," the sheriff said. The widow didn't answer. The father spat into the dirt. "She stole her, right out from under me, at the block. You saw it." The sheriff's gaze lingered on the widow. "I saw something." The father stepped closer, jabbing a finger toward the cabin. "Well, say it. Say she broke the law." The sheriff's badge glinted again as he shifted. "Depends what law you mean." The widow's voice was calm. "The one that bends to whoever owns the land?" The sheriff's lips twitched. "Smart woman." The father growled. "Don't play games. She's mine. Tell her." The sheriff's eyes slid back to the widow. "That true?" "No," she said. The father slammed his fist against the frame. "You hear her? She don't care about law. She thinks she's above it." The widow's reply was steady. "I think you've lost the right to it." The girl rose slowly, crossing the room until she stood beside the widow. She didn't speak. She only slid her hand into the widow's, small fingers gripping tight. The father saw it and froze. His jaw tightened, his shoulders shook. "She don't belong to you." The widow squeezed the girl's hand once, then spoke. "She does now." The sheriff shifted again, eyes narrowing. "This'll bring trouble." The widow didn't look at him. "It already has." The father barked. "You'll pay for this. Both of you. I'll burn this house to the ground." The sheriff lifted a hand. "That's enough." The father wheeled on him. "Don't you tell me what's enough." "That girl's mine." The sheriff's voice was sharp now. She's standing where she chooses. That's law enough for me tonight." The father stared, breathing heavy, his hands clenching and unclenching. "You'll regret this," he muttered. The widow's voice was flat. "Leave." He didn't move. His eyes darted between them, wild, desperate. "Ray," the sheriff said, "go home." The father's shoulders sagged. He stumbled back a step, then another, boots dragging in the dirt. His voice carried low, almost broken. "She'll curse you, just like she cursed me." The widow didn't answer. She closed the door, slid the bar back into place, and turned the lock. The cabin fell quiet again, only the fire snapping in the hearth. The girl's hand still clutched hers tight. The widow looked down at her. "You did right." The girl shook her head. "I didn't say anything." "You didn't have to." The girl's grip didn't loosen. She stared at the fire, silent, her eyes burning the same as before. Outside, footsteps faded into the night. The sheriff's boots crunched away, steady and slow. The father's voice carried once more, faint but sharp. "This ain't over." The widow and girl stayed at the door, hands still locked, waiting until the sound was gone. Only then did the widow lead her back to the chairs. The fire burned low, the shadows stretching higher. The girl sat close, still silent. The widow leaned back, eyes fixed on the flames. She spoke once more, blunt and sure. "Whatever law they twist, whatever game they play, you're here now. That won't change." The girl nodded once, wordless, her hand still wrapped in the widow's. And the night held, heavy and unbroken. Morning broke with silence. No rooster, no voices, just the sound of wind scraping against the cabin walls. The girl opened the door first, her small hand lifting the latch slow. The rope hung there. It was thick, coarse, looped, nailed into the doorframe with rusted iron. The knot was clumsy but certain. A message. Not yet a noose, but close enough. The girl froze, her breath caught. She whispered, "It's for me." The widow stepped forward, brushing past her. She gripped the rope in one hand, yanked it free, and tore the nail from the frame. She tossed it into the dirt, voice flat. "It's for both of us." The girl's eyes stayed on the loop. "They'll come at night." The widow didn't pause. "Then let them." The girl turned to her, voice sharp. "You're not scared?" "No." "You should be. I've been scared enough for one life." The girl crossed her arms tight, staring at the dirt where the rope lay. "They mean it." "They always mean it," the widow said. She bent, picked up the rope, coiled it, and dropped it into the fire pit outside. The girl asked, "Why not keep it?" "Because I don't need reminders." The girl's voice rose. "I do." The widow's eyes cut to her. "You need sleep, not reminders." The girl looked away, jaw clenched. "I won't sleep." The widow leaned close, her tone hard. "Then you'll watch, and you'll see. I don't bend to rope or threats." The girl said nothing. Her shoulders trembled, but her eyes stayed fixed on the fire pit, where the rope lay coiled like a dead snake. Inside the cabin, the widow poured water into the basin, set bread on the table, moved with steady hands. The girl followed, still tense. "They'll be back," the girl whispered again. The widow nodded once. "Good. Let them show their faces in daylight." The girl shook her head. "Not daylight. They'll wait till dark. They'll wait till you can't see." The widow cut the bread, her knife scraping wood. "I see fine in the dark." The girl's voice cracked. "No, you don't." The widow glanced up. "Then I'll listen." The girl sat, folding into the chair. Her words came low. "They'll take me. No, they'll try. Yes, Then what? Then they'll learn. The girl's hands tightened around the edge of the table. Her eyes lifted, burning, searching the widow's face. Why don't you just send me away? Give me back. Then they'll leave you. The widow's reply was cold, certain. I don't send family away. The girl flinched. Family? Yes. You don't mean that. I do. The girl dropped her gaze to the table. Silence stretched, broken only by the fire snapping in the hearth. A knock rattled the door again, softer this time. Both of them froze. The widow stood. She opened the door without hesitation. No man stood there, only a boy, no older than 12, hat pulled low. He shoved something forward in his hand. Said to give you this. The widow took the folded scrap of paper. Who said? The boy shrugged. Don't know. They paid me a nickel. He turned and ran before she could ask again. The girl's voice trembled. What does it say? The widow unfolded it. 5 words, written in uneven hand. She's not yours, not ever. The widow crumpled it in her fist. She tossed it into the fire. Same hand that nailed the rope. The girl's face paled. It's him. It's them, the widow corrected. Never just one. The girl stood from her chair. Her voice was sharp, urgent. Then fight back now. Don't wait. Don't sit here till they come. The widow's voice cut back. Sit down. The girl didn't move. Sit, the widow said again. The girl sat. Her shoulders shook, but her chin stayed high. The widow lowered herself opposite her. You think I don't know how this goes? They circle, they threaten, they throw rope and words like stones. Then they wait for the crack. They wait for me to break. The girl's voice wavered. Will you? No. You sound sure. I am sure. The girl whispered. I'm not. The widow reached across the table, set her hand over the girl's. Then hold steady with me. The girl looked at her hand, pale against the widow's rough skin. She didn't pull away. Outside, voices carried faint on the wind. Laughter, boots scraping against dirt, men moving just far enough to be heard. The girl whispered, They're already here. The widow squeezed her hand once, firm. Then let them listen. The voices outside rose and fell, never coming closer, never leaving, just circling, like wolves testing the fence. The girl leaned toward the fire, eyes reflecting its light. How long will it last? As long as they think I'll fold. And if you don't, then it ends. The girl swallowed, silent for a long while. Finally she asked, And me? What if I fold? The widow's voice cut firm. You won't. You don't know that. I do. Because you're here, and you didn't run. The girl's lips pressed tight. She blinked fast, but no tears fell. Outside, the laughter faded into silence. Boots scraped away. The night pressed close again. The widow rose, checked the doorframe, the latch, the bar. She stood a long moment staring at the empty space where the rope had hung. The girl's voice came soft. They'll put it back. The widow turned. Then I'll tear it down again. The girl nodded once. Her eyes burned, but her shoulders eased. Just slightly. The fire sank lower. The rope burned slow in the pit outside, smoke curling into the night air. Inside, the widow sat again, hands steady on the table. The girl kept her place close, caught between terror and belonging, but leaning slowly toward the latter. The bucket scraped against stone as the girl lowered it, rope rough against her palms. Morning light cut across the yard, sharp and cold. The water below rippled, black as glass. She hauled it up slow, muscles straining. Halfway, the rope jerked, caught on something wedged between stone and soil. She tugged again. Something clattered loose, heavy, metallic. falling onto the dirt beside the well. The girl froze. It wasn't a rock. It was a badge. She bent, lifted it with both hands. The metal was dulled but not rusted through. She traced the shape with her thumb, feeling the star, the etching still faintly visible. Her stomach knotted. She whispered, "Sheriff." The back door creaked. The widow stepped out, drying her hands on a rag. She stopped when she saw what the girl held. "Where?" The girl pointed to the ground. "It was stuck in the rope." The widow took it, turned it over in her hand. Her face tightened. The girl's voice was sharp. "Whose is it?" The widow didn't answer. "Tell me." The widow's jaw clenched. "It belonged to his brother." The girl blinked. "The sheriff's?" "Yes." The girl stepped closer. "Then why's it here?" The widow's eyes stayed on the badge. "Because your father wasn't the first man to stand at that well." The girl's breath caught. "What happened?" The widow looked up at her. "You happened. That's why it's back now." The girl's voice rose. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," the widow said. "He sees you, he sees me, and it pulls the rest of it up. The past don't stay buried when blood walks on it." The girl shook her head, angry. "That's just words." "What happened?" The widow turned the badge in her palm, eyes far away. "My husband crossed the sheriff's kin, took land that wasn't his to take, though the papers said different. One night this badge turned up by the well. The next morning my husband didn't come back from town." The girl's eyes widened. "They killed him?" The widow's voice dropped. "They erased him? No trial, no grave, no word, just whispers, and a badge at my door." The girl's hands tightened. "And now it's here again." The widow nodded once. The girl's voice shook. "Because of me. Because of us." The girl turned away, staring at the trees beyond the yard. "He'll never stop. My father, the sheriff, none of them." The widow stepped closer, put the badge into her hand. "Then hold it. Know what they fear. They hide their sins in metal and silence. That's why it comes back." The girl looked at the star in her palm. "It's heavy." "It should be." The girl clenched it tight. "You said they erased him. Why didn't you tell me before?" The widow's voice was sharp. "Because it wasn't yours to carry." "It is now." The widow's eyes softened, just slightly. "Yes." The girl stared at the badge, then shoved it into her pocket. "Then let them come." The widow studied her, a shadow crossing her face. "You sound like him." The girl's eyes snapped up. "Like who?" "My husband." The girl's mouth tightened. "Then maybe that's what they're scared of." The widow didn't answer. She turned back toward the cabin. "Come inside." The girl stayed by the well, staring down at the black water. The badge felt hot against her thigh. She whispered to herself, "They can't erase me." Inside, the widow set the kettle on, hands moving sharp, practiced. When the girl came in, she spoke without looking up. "You don't speak of the badge to anyone." The girl's reply was blunt. "What if they ask? You say nothing. What if they already know? Then silence is stronger." The girl sat at the table, glaring at the wood grain. "You can't keep burying it." The widow's voice cut. "I can. I have." And look what crawled back. The widow slammed the kettle onto the stove. The sound echoed through the cabin. She turned, her voice low and fierce. "You think I don't know what it means? You think I don't feel him standing outside every time the floor creaks at night? I carry that badge in my bones. Don't tell me it crawled back. It never left." The girl's eyes stung, but she didn't look away. "Then we fight." The widow exhaled hard, her shoulders loosening. "You're too young to say that." "I'm old enough to mean it." Silence hung heavy between them. The kettle began to hiss. The widow finally spoke, softer. "He was proud, my husband. Too proud. Thought paper and law would protect him. They never did. Don't make the same mistake." The girl's voice steadied. "I won't. I've got you." The widow's face shifted, just a flicker of something unspoken. "And I've got you." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. The girl reached into her pocket, feeling the badge again, cold now against her skin. She whispered, "They'll come tonight." The widow nodded. "They will. And if they bring more, then we'll answer more." The girl leaned forward, her eyes burning across the table. "You won't let them take me?" The widow's reply was iron. "Never." The girl closed her eyes, gripping the badge tighter. For the first time, she didn't feel small. The widow poured water into the mugs, the steam rising between them like smoke from the past. And outside, in the dirt by the well, the wind carried faint echoes, as if boots had already circled, as if voices were waiting just beyond hearing. The sun dropped behind the trees, leaving the yard washed in gray. The widow barred the door, then stood still, listening. The girl sat at the table, her hand brushing the badge in her pocket like it might speak back. Boots crunched outside, more than one set, voices low, steady, circling. The widow lifted the bar and swung the door wide before they could knock. The sheriff stood in the yard with 3 men at his back. His badge caught the last light, gleaming against his chest. "Evening," he said. The widow didn't answer. The sheriff stepped closer, boots sinking into the dirt. "You've stirred plenty." The widow stayed in the doorway. "I didn't stir it. It was already boiling." One of the men laughed, sharp and thin. "That your girl in there? Pretty thing. She don't look like she belongs." The widow's voice was clipped. "She belongs." The sheriff held up a hand, silencing the man. His eyes never left the widow's. "They say you claimed her. Marriage, blood, name." "They're right." The sheriff tilted his head. "That's a bold word. Claim." The widow's jaw tightened. "You'd prefer sold?" The sheriff's lips curved, but not in humor. "She was her father's. She isn't anymore." The men shifted behind him, restless. One spat into the dirt. Another muttered, "Law says otherwise." The sheriff glanced back, then forward again. "Law bends, widow. You know that." "I know it breaks." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Careful." The widow didn't move. The sheriff's gaze slid past her, into the cabin. "She in there?" The girl rose slowly from the table. She stepped into the doorway beside the widow, her hand clutching the older woman's sleeve. Her voice was small but steady. "I'm here." The men stirred at the sound. One chuckled. "Got spirit." The sheriff studied her. "Do you want this? Or did she make you?" The girl swallowed hard. "I chose." The words cut through the yard like a blade. Even the men fell quiet. The sheriff's jaw flexed. "You're young. You don't know what you're choosing." The girl's grip on the widow's sleeve tightened. "I know enough." The sheriff shifted his stance, his voice lower now. "If you stay, you bring heat on her, on both of you. Men don't forget debts." The girl looked up at the widow, then back to him. "Then let them come." The men muttered again, unsettled this time. One hissed, "She'll bite back." Another said, "Not her, the widow behind her." The sheriff's eyes flickered to his men, then back to the girl. "You think you're safe here?" The girl's voice cracked, but she forced it out. "Safer than with him." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. The widow's hand brushed the girl's shoulder, steady, grounding. The sheriff exhaled through his nose, slow. Your father won't let this stand." The widow's reply was flat. "Then let him fall." The sheriff studied her for a long moment. "You've got steel, but steel bends. Not mine." The sheriff finally stepped back, boots grinding against gravel. "This isn't done." The men followed, but not with the same swagger they had carried in. One looked back once, his face shadowed, his voice low. "Ain't natural. A girl don't belong there." The girl answered, louder than before. "I do now." The men stopped. The sheriff's head turned slightly. But he didn't speak. He motioned with his hand, and they walked on, their boots carrying them back into the dark. The widow barred the door again. The girl stood still, chest heaving. "You spoke," the widow said. The girl nodded. They had to hear it. The widow's eyes lingered on her. They heard, and they won't forget. The girl's hand brushed the badge in her pocket again. "Good." The widow turned back to the fire, her voice low. "You shifted something tonight." The girl asked, "Did I make it worse?" Maybe better. Hard to tell the difference." The girl sat again at the table, her hands trembling. I wasn't sure the words would come out. They came. The girl's eyes met the widow's. Did I sound weak? No. Did I sound like him? The widow's gaze held steady. "You sounded like you." The girl let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her shoulders sagged, but her eyes still burned. The widow sat across from her, the firelight casting deep shadows across her face. "They'll circle again." The girl nodded once. "Then we wait." The night pressed in around the cabin. Outside, the yard lay empty, but the earth still held the echo of boots. The weight of words spoken and words unsaid. The cabin had been still for hours. The widow sharpened her knife against stone, the scrape steady, unbroken. The girl sat near the fire, badge pressed flat against her palm, staring at the glow. The knock didn't come this time. The door burst open. Two men shoved their way in, faces shadowed, breath thick with liquor. One carried a length of chain, the other a rusted pistol. The widow rose slow. The girl shot to her feet. The man with the pistol grinned. "Evening, widow." The widow's voice was flat. "You chose the wrong night." The man with the chain barked a laugh. "No night's wrong for collecting." The girl's voice cracked, but it came. "Get out." They laughed harder. The pistol lifted, pointed at the widow. "We ain't here to talk." The widow stepped closer to the table, her hand sliding across the knife she had just honed. "Neither am I." The man with the chain swung first, knocking a chair sideways. The girl darted back, grabbing a piece of firewood from beside the hearth. The widow moved fast. The knife flashed. The chain rattled, blood spraying across the wood floor. The man howled, dropping to his knees. The other cursed, cocking the pistol. The widow slammed the table against him, the wood jarring his arm. The shot went wide, shattering glass. The girl screamed, lifted the firewood, and struck. The pistol clattered to the floor. The widow's knife struck again, quick, sharp. Silence followed, broken only by ragged breathing. Both men lay sprawled, one moaning, the other still. Blood smeared across the table, soaking into the grain where bread had once been laid. The girl dropped the firewood, chest heaving. Her eyes were wide, locked on the red. "It's everywhere." The widow's voice was clipped. It had to be. The girl shook her head fast. "We killed them." The widow wiped the blade against her skirt. "We stopped them." The girl's voice rose, panicked. "There's blood on the table, the same table. We ate here." The widow looked at it, then back at her. "Then we'll eat here again. That's how it ends." The girl's hands trembled. "What if they send more?" "They will." What if they don't stop? They won't. The girl's voice broke. Then what's the point? The widow stepped closer, her eyes fierce. The point is you're still standing. They wanted you gone. You're not gone. The girl stared at her, tears hot but unshed. It feels wrong. It is wrong, the widow said, but it's ours now. The girl's gaze dropped back to the table. The blood glistened in the firelight, a dark stain spreading wide. She whispered, "It won't wash out." "Then let it stay." The girl looked up, confused. "Let it remind us," the widow said. "Let it remind them. This is what happens when they cross this door." The girl swallowed hard. "Will the sheriff come?" The widow's voice was steady. "Yes. And when he does, then we face him." The girl's hands tightened around the badge in her pocket. "With this?" "With everything," the widow said. The girl nodded once, but her shoulders shook. She whispered, "I hit him. I hit him hard." The widow placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did right." The girl's lips trembled. "I didn't mean to. You meant enough." The girl's eyes filled, but didn't spill. She whispered again, "We're not safe." The widow squeezed her shoulder. "No one's safe, but we're alive. That's more than they wanted." The silence after was heavy, broken only by the fire hissing against broken glass. The men's bodies lay still on the floor, shadows long against the walls. The girl finally asked, voice thin, "What do we do with them?" The widow's reply was sharp. "We bury them." The girl's eyes widened. "Here?" "Yes." The girl shook her head. "They'll find the ground. They'll dig." The widow's voice hardened. "Then let them dig. Let them see what happens when they cross this door." The girl whispered, "It's too much. It's just enough." The widow dragged one body toward the door, blood smearing across the floorboards. The girl stood frozen, then bent, grabbing the other by the boots. Together they pulled them into the yard, breath ragged, sweat cold. The earth gave way slow beneath their shovels, dirt falling heavy in the dark. The girl's arms shook, but she didn't stop. The widow dug, steady, unbroken. When the hole was deep enough, they rolled the bodies in. The girl turned her face away, but her hands still pushed the dirt back over them. When it was done, they stood silent, dirt clinging to their skin. The widow's voice was blunt. "Now we go inside." The girl nodded once. Back in the cabin, the table still bore the stain, deep and dark. The girl stared at it, unmoving. "We'll always see it." "Yes." The girl whispered, "Then maybe it will see us too." The widow looked at her, eyes narrowing. "Good, let it." They sat, side by side, the firelight casting the red into shadow. The girl's hands were raw, but she didn't hide them. The widow's knife lay clean on the table, sharp as ever. The silence returned, but it was different now, heavier, sharper, and filled with the weight of what they had done together. The lantern light flickered against the stones, throwing long shadows across the yard. The well stood silent, its black mouth open, watching. The widow pressed the shovel into the dirt, slow and steady, while the girl knelt beside her, pulling loose clumps with her hands. The body lay wrapped in canvas, stiff and heavy. The smell clung to the night, sharp, metallic. The girl's breath came short. "It's too close to the house." The widow didn't look up. "It's where it belongs." The girl wiped sweat from her face. "People will see." "They already see." The girl's voice cracked. "Not like this." The widow shoved the shovel deeper, dirt piling beside the well. "This ground holds more than one secret. One more won't break it." The girl stared at the dark water behind them. "It feels like it's watching." "It should." The girl's voice dropped to a whisper. It knows. The widow's arms didn't falter. So do we. Silence fell except for the scrape of metal on soil. The girl finally whispered again. How deep? Deep enough they don't rise. The girl swallowed hard, staring at the wrapped shape on the ground. And if someone digs? The widow's voice cut sharp. Then they find out what happens when they dig. The girl pressed her hands into the dirt, helping shape the hole. Her arms trembled. Her back ached, but she didn't stop. When the pit was ready, the widow nodded once. Now. They moved to the body. The girl hesitated, then grabbed one end of the canvas. The widow took the other. Together they lifted, straining under the weight. The girl whispered, "He's heavy." The widow's reply was cold. "He should be." They lowered him slowly, the canvas scraping against the dirt walls. The sound was rough, final. The girl turned her head away, eyes wet but unblinking. "Say something." The widow stared into the hole. "He made his choice. That's enough words." The girl's voice trembled. "Then what do we do?" The widow looked at her. "We cover him." The girl reached for the shovel, but her hands shook too hard to grip. The widow steadied her fingers, then placed the handle firm in her grasp. "Together," the widow said. They shoveled dirt back into the hole, slow, uneven. The earth swallowed the canvas bit by bit until nothing showed but fresh soil, dark and damp. The girl whispered, "It's wrong." The widow kept moving. "It's necessary." The girl dropped the shovel, falling to her knees, pressing dirt with her bare hands. "It'll never be gone." The widow crouched beside her, voice low, steady. "It isn't meant to be gone. It's meant to stay down." The girl pressed harder. Her palms raw. "What if it doesn't?" "Then we push harder." The lantern hissed, flame wavering. The girl looked up at the widow, eyes blazing. "Why do you keep me here? Why not let me go?" The widow held her gaze. "Because you're mine." The girl's breath caught. "You don't mean that." The widow's voice softened, just barely. "I do. You're mine now, my daughter." The word hung heavy, heavier than the dirt, heavier than the silence. The girl stared, stunned. "Daughter?" "Yes." Her lips trembled. "You've never said it." "I'm saying it now." The girl's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because you earned it tonight." The girl looked down at her hands, caked in soil and blood. "This isn't how daughters should earn it." The widow's jaw tightened. "No, but it's the way it came." The girl blinked fast, trying to steady herself. "Do you mean it? Truly?" The widow reached, wiped dirt from her cheek with her thumb. "Truly." The girl nodded, silent tears sliding down her face, mixing with the dirt. The widow stood, drove the shovel into the mound once more, patting the earth flat. "It's done." The girl rose slowly, her body aching, her eyes never leaving the fresh grave. The widow picked up the lantern, holding it high. The light spilled across the yard, glinting against the stones of the well. The girl whispered, "It'll never leave us." The widow answered, "Good, let it stay." The girl looked at her. "You want it to haunt us?" "I want it to remind us." The girl pressed her lips tight, then reached for the widow's hand. The widow let her take it, firm, steady. Together they stood in the yard, the grave behind them, the well beside them, the night pressing close. The girl's voice was barely audible. "What happens now?" The widow's reply was simple. "We wait." The girl leaned against her side, exhausted. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was borrowing space. She felt claimed. The lantern flickered once, then steadied, casting light over the mound of earth. The well's black mouth stayed open, silent but heavy, holding everything they'd buried and everything they hadn't. The night was still when the knock came. Not hard, not hurried. A slow, steady rhythm that carried more weight than shouting. The widow rose from her chair, lantern light soft against her face. The girl sat at the table, frozen, her hand brushing the badge in her pocket. The widow unbarred the door and pulled it open. The sheriff stood alone in the yard. No men behind him, no boots scuffing in the dirt. Just him, his badge glinting faint in the lantern light, and a Bible tucked under his arm. "Evening," he said. The widow didn't move. "You came quiet." "Quiet's the only way left." He stepped closer, but not past the threshold. His eyes flicked to the girl, then back to the widow. "You know why I'm here." The widow's voice was flat. "Say it." He lifted the Bible slightly. "The girl's fate. Blood ties run deep. A father's claim don't vanish because a widow says it should." The girl's voice broke the silence, small but steady. "He doesn't own me." The sheriff's eyes softened for a moment, but his voice stayed firm. "Law says otherwise." The widow raised her hand, firelight catching on the ring that circled her finger, a plain band, worn thin, but shining in the glow. She held it out for him to see. "She's mine, by vow, by house, by name." The sheriff stared at it, lips pressed tight. "That ring's for your husband." The widow's jaw set. "It's for whoever I bind to it. Tonight, it binds her." The girl stood from the table, moved to the widow's side and placed her hand over hers. Her small fingers covered the ring, her eyes burning as she looked at the sheriff. "She's not lying," the girl said. The sheriff's gaze lingered on their hands, the ring pressed between them. He shifted his weight, the Bible heavy against his chest. "This isn't how it works." The widow's reply was cold. "It works because we say it does." Silence stretched, sharp and heavy. The sheriff looked at the girl again. "You sure? Once spoken, it don't undo easy." The girl's grip tightened. "I'm sure." The sheriff exhaled, long and slow. His eyes dropped to the dirt, then back to the ring. "Men won't accept it. They'll call it trickery." The widow's voice didn't waver. "Let them choke on their words." The sheriff's hand brushed the edge of the Bible. "What about God's word?" The widow's eyes narrowed. "You think he stands with rope and chains? You think he writes law the way you twist it?" The sheriff didn't answer. He glanced at the grave mound near the well, fresh dirt still dark in the lantern's glow. His jaw tightened. "You've buried more than bodies here." The widow's voice was sharp. "Yes, and I'll bury more if I must." The girl's voice cracked, but she spoke loud enough to carry. "I'm not going back." The sheriff studied her a long moment. "You're young. Choices cut deeper than you think." The girl lifted her chin. "So let it cut." The sheriff's eyes moved back to their hands, still locked together. He stepped closer to the threshold, but stopped short. His voice dropped low. "This house won't know peace, not after tonight." The widow's reply was blunt. Peace was never offered. The sheriff's lips parted as if to argue, but he closed them again. He looked once more at the ring, the firelight catching on its worn edges. His shoulders sagged slightly, not in defeat, but in weariness. "You've made your vow," he said. The widow nodded once. "I have." The sheriff looked at the girl. "And you?" The girl's eyes didn't waver. "I have too." The sheriff lowered his gaze to the Bible, then back up. "Then may it hold." For the first time, he stepped back. His boots crunched against gravel, slow and measured. He didn't turn his back until he reached the edge of the yard. The widow closed the door, slid the bar across, and leaned her hand against the wood. The girl stood beside her, silent, her hand still pressed over the ring. After a long moment, the widow spoke. "You're mine." The girl's voice was a whisper. "And you're mine." The widow turned to her, eyes catching the lantern light. "Daughter." The girl blinked fast, her throat tight. "Mother." The words hung heavy, sealing tighter than any law, stronger than any badge. They moved back to the table. The stain of blood still marked the wood, dark and unyielding. The widow set the lantern down, its light spilling across the mark. The girl didn't look away this time. She sat, placed her hand flat over the stain, her other hand still clutching the widow's. The widow sat beside her, the ring gleaming faint between their fingers. Outside, the night stretched wide, full of whispers and threats. But the cabin held, not in peace, but in defiance, and that was enough. The fire sank low, embers glowing red in the hearth. The girl leaned closer to the widow, her hand still pressed over the stain. Her voice came faint, but steady. "It won't end, will it?" The widow shook her head once. "No. But neither do we." The girl's eyes burned, not with fear this time, but with something sharper. She whispered, "Then let them come." The widow's lips tightened, almost a smile, almost not. She wrapped her arm around the girl's shoulders, pulling her closer to the table's edge. Together, they faced the fire. Together, they waited. The fire hissed as another log split under its own weight, falling into coals that glowed brighter for a moment before sinking low again. The girl's hand stayed flat on the table, fingers spread across the bloodstain as though she could hold it down, keep it from seeping deeper into the wood. Her other hand clung to the widow's, the ring pressing between their palms. "They'll circle again," the girl whispered. The widow's reply was blunt. "Yes, tomorrow, or the day after, but they will." The girl's throat tightened. "What if they burn it down, the house, everything?" The widow looked into the fire, her jaw set. "Then we build again, stones on the same ground?" The girl turned to her, eyes wet but steady. "And if they kill us?" The widow finally looked back, her voice sharp, certain. "Then they don't win. They can kill bodies, not bonds." The girl swallowed, leaning into her side. "I don't want to be alone again." "You're not," the widow said. She pulled her closer, resting her chin lightly on the girl's hair. "Not now, not ever again." The girl closed her eyes, holding on to those words like rope in a storm. Outside, the night stretched wide. The well stood silent, its stones slick with dew. The fresh mound of earth looked darker than the rest, as though the ground itself refused to hide what it held. From the trees, a crow called once, sharp, cutting through the stillness. Then silence returned. Inside, the fire sank lower, shadows climbing the walls. The widow and the girl sat together at the table, neither moving, neither loosening their grip. The stain stayed, the ring shone, and the house stood, not safe, not clean, but standing.